Today we are honored to welcome Ambassador Stuart Laing, former British ambassador to Oman from 2002 to 2005, and co-author of Unshocked Till the End of Time, a history of relations between Britain and Oman from 1650 to 1970. In this work, Ambassador Laing and Robert Alston explore one of the world's longest-standing diplomatic relationships, shaped by trade, shared interests, and lasting mutual respect. In today's conversation, Ambassador Laing shares insights from this history and what it means to the future of UK-Oman relations. Ambassador Laing, thank you for joining us today at Sultan Qaboos Cultural Center. We are honored to have you here with us. And to begin with, could you briefly introduce the topic of your talk today, Britain and Oman, looking back, looking forward?
Yes, I'm very glad to do that. And I should say that I'm absolutely delighted to be here in Washington, D.C., and to be particularly here in the Sultan Qaboos Cultural Center, which I have not visited before. So this is a new experience for me, which I'm delighted to go through. And in answer to your question, I think perhaps I should explain the unusual title for our book, which also explains a little bit about what I'm interested in and what I hope to explain to the public in the lecture that follows. Unshook Till the End of Time. When my sister-in-law, my wife's sister, saw this title, she said, "Oh, Stuart has made a terrible mistake. The word is not unshook, it's unshaken." And we had to explain that this was a quotation in part from the great treaty of 1800, not the first treaty, but one of the very early treaties between Britain and the ruler in Muscat, I should say, at that time, where the text of the treaty said that the friendship between the two nations shall be unshook till the end of time, or until the sun and moon have finished their revolving career. Well, what wonderful language. I'm afraid we don't write treaties like that with that kind of poetry any longer. Anyway, what I want to do is look back and look forward, because my career has been partly as a diplomat and partly as a historian at the University of Cambridge. And I think all good diplomats need to look back as well as looking forward. Why look back? Because we all have history, and this history lives on in us in our daily lives. In Britain, we remember our history, and it comes back to sometimes not in very agreeable ways, but we do have a history which we recall. But also a good diplomat. So a good diplomat, to understand the country where they're living, good diplomats will find out a little bit about what's been going on before. And also good diplomats will look forward. They must look forward to what the relationship is going to be and how the interests of the country can best be served in the times lie ahead.
That's a very powerful title, and we're excited for your lecture today. For people who are not very familiar, not familiar with the topic, how would you describe the relationship between Britain and Oman in a simple term?
Well, of course, it is a relationship which rests on very secure foundations, goes back a long time, as I was describing. Even before 1800. It goes back a long time, and so it rests on that and the friendships that have been built up over that time. And friendships, not just because it's nice having friends, friendships based on real common interests in security, in trade, in culture and education, and so on, as we'll discuss a little bit more later on.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador. Let's now explore how this relationship began and developed over the centuries. Your research spans several centuries. When did the relationship between Britain and Oman first begin, and what brought the two countries into contact?
Well, it all really began in the early part of the 17th century, let's just say the 1600s in our era, and it was based at that time really on common interests common maritime interests. Even at that time, Oman or Muscat was an important international trading country or community, and Britain was developing its interests in India. So I don't know how it is here, but in Britain, people tend automatically to think of Oman as a Gulf country. Of course, it is a Gulf country, but it is primarily an Indian Ocean country. And Britain at that time, expanding the interests in India through the East India Company, wanted to be sure of safe travel for their ships going backwards and forwards from India. And the ruler of Muscat also wanted to be sure that his trading ships could trade to and from India as well as to East Africa in safety and security.
Okay, that's interesting. Speaking about maritime nation, how did Oman's strategic position in the Indian Ocean shape its connection with global powers like Britain?
Well, it was crucial. It was central, at least in the early days. And still, of course, security in those waters is essential, as we are seeing from current events today. So, yes, it was trade. The East India Company was founded in 1600, and their ships were beginning to come into that part of the world, into the Indian Ocean, and into the Gulf, because they were also trading into Persia. And so the security of the Gulf was an important issue, both for the ruler in Muscat and his people, and for the British through the East India Company. And this shaped the beginning of the relationship, but of course things changed as the centuries passed, and the British no longer, of course, have an empire in India, and Oman is not quite the maritime power that it was in global terms as it was then in the 17th and 18th century. So things have changed, but I think we accept that these developments change, and we adjust our interests as we move forward.
Yeah, since your book was inspired by the early agreements between Oman and Britain, early agreements between two sides obviously emphasized cooperation and stability. What factors helped this relationship endure over time, in your opinion?
Well, the trading, of course, continued the British interests in India continued well into the 20th century. India gained independence in 1947, and even through the early part of the 20th century, the British valued very much the need to have security in the Indian Ocean for travel, but also of a connection with Omani ports and later on for air facilities in order to facilitate movement between Britain and the East. Not just India, but India was a very large part of it. And India was very important to the ruler of Muscat and his sailors as well.
Yeah. Looking across this long history, which period or development do you believe had the most lasting impact on shaping the relationship as we see it today?
Well, to begin with, it was security. But as I say, the relationship expanded greatly as time went on. And security also took different forms in the form of military collaboration and so on, which we can touch on in more detail later if you like. And other aspects became important as well. For example, culture. By culture, I mean education in particular. So that what we see today is that Omanis are going to study in Britain. We have various kinds of research collaboration which continue. So culture in the broadest sense forms a part of the relationship, and commerce and industry. So commerce in those early days was just simply about trade, and now it is trade plus investment. Trade and investment go together.
Great, thank you, Ambassador. Let's now turn to the modern era and Oman's transformation under its leaders. Oman underwent significant transformation in the modern era. How did His Majesty late Sultan Qaboos shapes the country's international role as you see it?
Well, hugely. I mean, the fact is, unfortunately, that when Sultan Qaboos, the late Sultan, took over in 1970, Oman was not a highly developed country, in fact, hardly a developed country at all. The number of roads that existed, the infrastructure was very limited, the education was very limited, A number of Omanis who cared about education were sending their children abroad for education. And Sultan Qaboos managed to address, I mean, it was an extraordinary achievement, actually, when you think about it. In those first 15 years, between 1970 and 1985, the country advanced very rapidly in terms of infrastructure, the building of roads, bridges and everything that goes with that, and in particular in terms of education, the foundation of the university, the extension of schools throughout the country. So there were very significant changes made.
Amazing, that's very true. Today, how would you describe the partnership between the UK and Oman, and which areas of cooperation are most significant in your opinion?
Well, I'm sorry if I take the risk of repeating myself, but security and military collaboration, this is important. I don't like to put any of these as one element more important than another. Let's just think of this like a tripod, I suppose, with military collaboration and security as one of the legs of the tripod, culture and education as another one, and commerce, trade and investment as a third. All of those are important in building the well-structured relationship that we have now.
That's amazing. With His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq leading Oman today, what direction do you see the country taking?
Well, His Majesty has been very, very careful, and when he came in, he said that he wanted to continue the policies of Sultan Qaboos, his predecessor, and to a very great extent he has done exactly that. But in other ways, he has continued this process, this idea of progression, which Sultan Qaboos established, that is to say that we should move forward to the modern era. And what does the modern era mean? Well, in terms of the 21st century, as opposed to the second half of the 20th century, we're talking about more technology, more collaboration in that kind of field. We're talking about more exchanges of people, of the development of tourism, a whole range of things which are bringing Oman from the 20th century, so well established by Sultan Qaboos in the last 30 years of that century, into being a modern state prepared to face the challenges of the 21st.
Thank you, Ambassador. Let's now focus on opportunities for strengthening this partnership even further. What opportunities do you see for strengthening relations between the UK and Oman in the future?
Well, I'd like to say a word here about the British-Omani Society. There are, in fact, two, as it were, friendship societies linking Britain and Oman. There is the British-Omani Society based in London, and then there's the Omani-British Society based in Muscat.
Yeah.
So this is a very nice balancing of the friendship between the two countries. But it's more than friendship, because both of these societies have developing ways of finding new avenues of collaboration. The Omani-British Society in Muscat is very much focused on the business connections. It's really a grouping of business people who have interest in developing business working relationships with Britain. And the British Omani Society in London does certainly some of that, and they bring into London and give them an audience for ministers and others who are very senior in the administration and also senior business people to talk about business opportunities and and investment development between Britain and Oman. And also the British Omani Society lays stress on this cultural aspect and the exchange of students. And so the British Omani Society, for example, subsidizes or pays for, gives grants for students who are studying Arabic in Manah, but also researchers who are doing research, particularly in natural sciences, in Oman.
Amazing. Since we are here at Sultan Qaboos Cultural Center, I would like to ask you, how important is cultural exchange, in your opinion, in building long-term understanding between nations?
The importance of cultural exchange, but in particular if we're talking about education, is that it looks forward, it looks to the next generation. I have mentioned students from Britain going to Oman in order to study Arabic, but of course it's more than that. It's Omani students coming to study in Britain in a whole range of subjects, and they're usually paid for or heavily subsidized by the Omani government. And that's a great thing, because that means that the next generation have experience of the other country. And it's these kind of exchanges which will form the new foundations for the developing relationship going forward to the future. People who have studied in the other country are more inclined to say, hey, let's go and do some business with these people, whichever direction it is in.
Yeah.
So I see a great future, because we are not neglecting the cultural and educational aspect of the connections between Britain and Oman.
Great. Since we're talking about the next generation and the youth, why do you think it's important for the youth to understand the history between Britain and Oman?
Well, now you're bringing me back to the very beginning of our discussion, that I think it's absolutely vital that we should not forget our history. That we know, because when you know where you come from, you have a better idea of where you are going to. And so I'm all in favor. I mean, I hate the word passionate when talking about things, but I have to say I'm a passionate historian. I see the value of history in the way that it teaches us to build on the foundations laid by our ancestors. Isaac Newton, the great British scientist, said that he was standing on the shoulders of giants when he made his discoveries and research. And so that's what we want to do. We want to stand on the shoulders of giants so that we can look clearly to where we're going.
Ambassador Laing, that's the end of our interview today. Thank you very much for your time. We truly appreciate your insights, and we are very much looking forward to hear your lecture tonight. I hope you enjoy your stay with us here at Sultan Qaboos Cultural Center in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.